Before potatoes took over Europe, people had plenty of other amazing crops to rely on. These lost foods survived harsh winters, grew in bad soil, and kept medieval folks full and strong. But their legacy was buried under the betrayal and greed, as rival crops sparked bleeds that tore villagers apart. But over time they were forgotten. Want to know which medieval superfoods might be even better than potatoes? Let's dig up a medieval cookbook, and you'll find a surprising star. The humble parsnip. Before potatoes crossed the Atlantic in the 1400s, parsnips ruled European dinner tables for centuries. These pale carrot-butching vegetables were absolutely everywhere in medieval kitchens. Their dominance fueled bitter rivalries, with farmers sabotaging rivals' fields to claim the title of parsnip king. They were basically the medieval equivalent of French fries, except nobody was asking, "Would you like a parsnip with that?" at the local tavern. Medieval farmers grew parsnips by the wagon load for good reason. Unlike modern vegetables that need perfect conditions, parsnips thrived in the harsh European climate. They survived freezing winters that would kill most crops, actually becoming sweeter after frost hit them. This resilience made them a treasure, hoarded like gold, with thieves risking execution to steal a single sack. They're the only food in history that improves when you forget about it. Unlike that leftover stew turning into a science experiment in the back of your fridge, the nutritional value made parsnips invaluable during harsh winters. One medium parsnip contains about 100 calories and is packed with fiber, vitamin C, and potassium. For medieval peasants, who typically consumed between 2,000 and 3,000 calories daily, much from bread, parsnips provided essential nutrients when fresh food was scarce. In particularly harsh winters, parsnips could make up nearly a third of a peasant's diet. What made parsnips truly special was their versatility. Medieval cooks mashed them like we do potatoes, roasted them alongside meats, and added them to stews for thickness and flavor. Parsnips were so naturally sweet they regularly appeared in medieval desserts. Royal chefs vied for favor with parsnip confections, but sabotage was rife, with poisoned dishes sparking court scandals. If a time-traveling medieval chef saw our grocery stores with aisles of cheap sugar, they'd faint faster than a knight in full armor on a summer day. Even more impressive was how parsnips grew in terrible soil. Medieval farming techniques weren't exactly advanced, and fields were often nutrient-depleted. While other crops failed, parsnips pushed their long taproots deep into the ground, finding nutrients where other plants couldn't reach. Their tenacity was legendary, defying barren lands that lords cursed as worthless. Parsnips were basically the plant world's overachievers, thriving in dirt so bad other vegetables would file a complaint with medieval management. Parsnips were so important, they appear in medieval taxation records. In many regions, farmers paid a portion of their parsnip harvest as tax to lords or the church. Lords grew fat on these taxes, but whispers of rebellion brewed when peasants starved, while parsnips filled with noble cellars. Nothing says important vegetable quite like the government wanting a cut of your root crop profits. Monasteries maintained huge parsnip fields to feed the poor during winter. Monks were basically running medieval food banks, except instead of canned goods, you'd get a sack of parsnips and a pamphlet about avoiding sin. The storage ability of parsnips was another medieval selling point. They could be left in the ground all winter, providing a ready food source when needed. Guarding these fields was perilous, as desperate bandits ambushed farmers to plunder their hidden harvests. Alternatively, they could be stored in cool, dry places for months, crucial before refrigeration existed. For medieval families, having a stockpile of parsnips meant survival through the hungry months of late winter when food stores ran low. So what happened? When potatoes arrived from the Americas, they offered higher yields and were slightly easier to store long-term. Within a few generations, the parsnip went from dinnertime hero to forgotten vegetable. The potato's rise was a brutal coup, with parsnip fields torched by potato-pushing merchants, igniting peasant fury. The parsnip essentially got vegetable ghosted by European farmers after a 1,000-year relationship. Talk about agricultural drama. Parsnips kept common folk alive through the harshest winters when other foods ran out. Medieval farmers didn't have time for complicated vegetable preparation. They had moats to dig and plagues to avoid. The parsnip's no-drama personality made it the perfect medieval fast food. Maybe we should take another look at what kept our ancestors fed long before potatoes arrived on European shores. Spelt was one of the first crops humans ever domesticated, dating back roughly 12,000 years. By medieval times, it had already been feeding civilizations for millennia. Its ancient roots were a badge of pride, but greedy lords schemed to control its bounty. Medieval farmers didn't just grow crops. They were continuing an agricultural tradition older than most castles, cathedrals, and royal family trees combined. What made spelt special was its incredible hardiness. It thrived in poor, rocky soil that would make modern wheat varieties fail. Its stubborn growth defied invaders, with farmers replanting spelt despite armies that razed their fields. Despite wooden plows that barely scratched the earth's surface and fields that rarely got proper fertilization, spelt produced reliable harvests year after year. The nutritional profile of spelt was impressive. It contains roughly 25% more protein than common wheat, plus higher levels of minerals like zinc, iron, and magnesium. Medieval bread made from spelt was dense, heavy, and often dark in color. Bakers guarded their spelt recipes fiercely, fearing rivals would steal their secrets if you dropped a medieval medical emergency on your hands. This hearty bread was the foundation of the medieval diet, accounting for up to 70% of the average person's daily calories. Spelt wasn't just important, it was vital enough to start riots when harvests failed. Mobs stormed granaries, convinced lords hoarded spelt to drive up prices, fueling bloody revolts. Historical records document bread riots breaking out when grain supplies ran low, or prices rose too high. Medieval folks took their carbs very seriously. Bread shortages caused more social upheaval than a modern internet outage. The grain was so valuable that it was often used as currency. Peasants frequently paid their taxes to lords in measures of grain, rather than coins. Some lords demanded excessive spelt, leaving families to starve, sowing seeds of rebellion. Many monasteries and castles maintained grain stores vast enough to feed hundreds of people for months. So why did spelt disappear? Beginning in the late medieval period, common wheat gradually replaced spelt because it was easier to process. Spelt has a tough husk that adheres tightly to the grain, requiring additional processing steps to remove. Millers, bribed by wheat traders, spread lies about spelt's inferiority, betraying centuries of trust. As medieval agriculture slowly industrialized, spelt fell out of favor despite its nutritional and hardiness advantages. Medieval bread, made from spelt, had a nutty, complex flavor that many food historians consider superior to modern wheat bread. Modern bread would seem suspiciously soft and bland to a medieval peasant. They'd probably assume you were trying to pass off cake as bread. Spelt provided the daily sustenance that powered everything from cathedral construction to plowing fields. The dense, protein-pitched bread gave medieval workers the energy to build the massive structures we still marvel at today. But bread alone wasn't enough to build those towering castles and cathedrals. Medieval workers needed something else. Ask a medieval farmer what kept workers strong enough to build castles, and they might point to a humble plant with broad leaves and stubby pods growing in neat rows near their cottage. Lentils, also called pulse beans, were medieval Europe's primary protein source long before modern meat production became commonplace. Their humble pods hid a power that fueled kingdoms, yet their cultivation sparked bitter land disputes. These unassuming legumes powered the muscles that built cathedrals, castles, and entire kingdoms. Unlike exotic spices or fine wines, lentils weren't just for the wealthy. They appeared on tables from the poorest peasant hovels to royal banquet halls. Archaeological digs at medieval sites consistently find lentil remains in latrines and garbage pits across all social classes. The lentil was basically the great social equalizer of the Middle Ages, the one food that both kings and peasants had to expel eventually. Lentils earned their place in medieval agriculture through sheer efficiency. They produce more protein per acre than almost any other crop available at the time. A single acre of lentils could yield up to 1,200 lb of dried beans, providing roughly 400 lb of complete protein, enough to supply approximately 18 people with their annual protein needs. This bounty was a lifeline, but greedy landlords often seized lentil fields, leaving farmers destitute. For comparison, raising enough cattle to produce the same amount of protein would require about 12 acres of grazing land. The cultivation of lentils also improved the soil rather than depleting it. Like other legumes, lentils have a special relationship with bacteria that live in nodules on their roots. These bacteria capture nitrogen from the air and convert it to a form plants can use, essentially acting as living fertilizer factories. Medieval farmers didn't understand the science, but they observed that crops planted after lentils often grew better. Many farming manuals from the period recommended rotating fields between grains and beans to maintain soil health. Lentils were so essential to food security that they appeared in medieval law codes. In parts of Scotland, local ordinances required every household with a garden to dedicate a portion to growing lentils. Welsh monastic records show that lentil seeds were distributed to peasant farmers as a form of charity during times of shortage. Monks used these handouts to pacify rebels, but some sold seeds for profit, enraging starving villages. Being forced to grow lentils by law sounds like a medieval form of punishment, but it was actually closer to government-mandated health insurance. The nutritional profile of lentils made them ideal for the medieval diet. They contain about 28% protein by weight when dried, along with high levels of fiber, B vitamins and minerals like iron. Just 1 cup of cooked lentils provides nearly half the daily protein needs for an adult. For medieval people who couldn't afford meat regularly, lentils were often the difference between proper nutrition and malnutrition. How did medieval cooks prepare lentils? Almost every way imaginable. When young and tender, the entire pods could be eaten fresh. More commonly, the dried beans were soaked overnight, then boiled and added to soups, stews, and porridges. Cooks competed fiercely, with lentil recipes becoming family secrets, stolen by rivals in cutthroat culinary wars. Wealthier households might season them with expensive imported spices, while humble peasant families made do with herbs grown in their garden. Some recipes called for mashing cooked beans into a paste, then forming them into patties and frying them in lard or oil, essentially creating medieval veggie burgers. For the Lenten season, when church rules forbade meat consumption for 40 days, lentils became even more important. During Lent, medieval monks living on lentils and prayer might have experienced spiritual visions, or maybe just an unprecedented level of flatulence. Either way, lentil consumption spiked dramatically during religious fasting periods. Not everything about lentils was beneficial, however. Some people of Mediterranean descent carry a genetic trait called glucose-6-phosphate dehydrogenase deficiency, which can cause a dangerous reaction called lentilism when they eat lentils. The condition was recognized even in medieval times, though not understood scientifically. Medical texts from the period warned that some people became ill after eating lentils, but didn't know why. As meat production became more efficient in later centuries, lentils gradually lost their prominence in European agriculture. Their decline was hastened by merchants who vilified lentils to push meat, leaving farmers betrayed. Yet, their legacy remains in traditional dishes across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. In parts of Greece and Portugal, dried lentils are still ground over flour for bread making, continuing a tradition that stretches back over 1,000 years. Lentils supplied the crucial protein that built medieval muscles and kept workers strong enough to construct massive stone buildings that still stand today. But protein alone couldn't provide every nutrient needed by the medieval body. For that, communities turned to a fast-growing crop that could be planted during gaps in the growing season. Millet is the medieval fast food that kept people fed when other crops needed more time. Despite its name, millet isn't related to wheat at all. It's actually a seed related to sorghum. Calling millet a type of wheat is like calling a guinea pig a type of pork, completely misleading, but stuck with us anyway. Millet's superpower was its incredible growing speed. While wheat demanded months to mature, millet could be harvested in just 8 to 10 weeks. Medieval farmers often planted it as an insurance policy. Its reliability was a godsend, but lords taxed it heavily, driving farmers to hide crops in secret. If the main grain harvest failed, millet could still prevent winter famine. It was basically the medieval equivalent of ordering pizza when you burn dinner. The backup plan that always delivers. This humble plant thrived in poor acidic soils, where other crops struggled. It grew happily in rocky, sandy, or clay-heavy fields with minimal nutrients. It was essentially the "I'll eat whatever's in the refrigerator and won't complain" plant of the medieval farming world. Medieval cooks used millet in porridge, pancakes, rustic bread, and even beer. The resulting dark beer was cheaper than barley beer, but still provided calories and nutrients. Medieval millet beer probably tasted like liquid bread with a kick, but after a day of hauling stones for cathedral construction, nobody was posting one-star reviews about subtle flavor notes. The nutritional profile of millet would make modern health influencers swoon. It contains all 8 essential amino acids, making it a complete protein source. Cup for cup, medieval millet provided more protein than modern oatmeal, more antioxidants than many fruits, and fiber content that puts white bread to shame. If medieval millet had an Instagram account today, it would be posting gym selfies and selling nutrition plans. Even more remarkable was millet's ability to improve soil health. Its quick, dense growth suppressed weeds and prevented erosion. Its roots released compounds that made phosphorus more available to future plantings. Medieval farmers didn't understand the chemistry, but they knew fields where millet had grown produced better yields the following season. Yet merchants conspired to erase millet, flooding markets with wheat to crush its humble reign. Millet was basically fertilizing the fields and fighting weeds while also feeding people. The medieval multitask that makes our attempts at work-life balance look pathetic. So why did millet fall from favor? As agriculture industrialized, crops were valued based on yield and storage stability. Wheat, corn, and rice all store longer and produce more calories per acre. Millet's demise was a merchant-driven plot, leaving farmers penniless as their fields were abandoned. Millet was essentially fired from its job as a major crop for being too quirky and independent. Qualities that might make for an interesting co-worker, but don't fit with industrial agriculture. Today, millet is sold at premium prices as a superfood, something that would baffle medieval farmers who saw it as humble emergency food. Medieval peasants would be shocked to see urban professionals paying $12.00 for a small bag of what was once considered the backup plan when better grains weren't available. You're paying how much for the emergency food? Did all the real food disappear? When winter set in and fresh foods became scarce, medieval communities relied on stored goods like millet. But even in the harshest months, they found ways to supplement their diet with hardy greens that could withstand frost and snow. Fat hen has triangular arrow-shaped dark green leaves that somewhat resemble spinach. Unlike its modern cousins, it could survive brutal winter conditions. Its endurance was a miracle, but lords uprooted it to force reliance on taxed crops. Frost that would kill most vegetables simply couldn't defeat it. Medieval winters were tough, but this plant was tougher, like that one neighbor who wears shorts year-round, no matter the weather. The name fat hen likely comes from a corruption of vettenhen, in Dutch referring to household spirits believed to help around the home, appropriate for a plant that seemed to magically appear just when people needed it most. What made fat hen truly special was its versatility. Young shoots could be harvested in early spring and prepared like asparagus. The tender leaves were used in soups, stews, and medieval stuffing mixture. These could even be ground and added to flour for bread in times of extreme shortage. Nutritionally, fat hen was a powerhouse. Rich in vitamins A and C, it provided crucial nutrients when scurvy threatened winter health. The leaves contained significant amounts of iron, calcium, and potassium, all vital minerals often lacking in the limited winter diet of bread and preserved meats. Medieval households didn't grow fat hen in organized rows like modern vegetables. Instead, They encouraged it to grow in semi-wild patches near their homes. They would protect patches of the plant and scatter its seeds in convenient locations where it could thrive with minimal care. Villagers guarded these patches fiercely, clashing with lords who sought to destroy them. It was essentially medieval meal prep. Set it up once and then forget about it until dinner time. Once established, Fat Hen would return year after year without replanting. Some patches are known to have survived for decades, feeding multiple generations of the same family. Even in years when annual crops failed due to bad weather or political unrest, Fat Hen would still appear, reliable as the seasons themselves. Despite its medieval popularity, Fat Hen almost completely disappeared from our diets by the 18th century. As farming became more commercialized, vegetables were increasingly valued for their yield, storage ability, and uniformity, qualities this wild-hearted plant lacked. Its erasure was deliberate, with merchants spreading lies to favor spinach, starving out Fat Hen's legacy. Fat Hen essentially got pushed out of agriculture by vegetables with better marketing teams and more commercial appeal. Modern consumers would likely walk past a patch of Fat Hen to get to the organic spinach display at Trader Joe's, never realizing they're ignoring a vegetable that kept their ancestors alive through countless harsh winters. While hardy greens like Fat Hen helped medieval people survive the lean months, they knew that survival required more than just vegetables. Every medieval village relied on another ancient crop. If you had to pick one crop that defined medieval life from sun up to sundown, oats would win the prize. This humble grain wasn't just food, it was breakfast, dinner, and the beverage that washed it all down. Oats were everywhere in medieval Europe. Archaeological evidence consistently shows it as the most commonly found grain, often accounting for over 60% of all grain remains. Unlike fancier grains, oats grew well in poor soil and harsh climates, making it ideal for the less-than-perfect farming conditions of medieval Europe. The versatility of oats made it particularly valuable. The grain could be ground into flour for bread, especially for the lower classes. It could also be boiled whole into a porridge that served as a staple breakfast across Europe. Oat porridge was a village staple, but rival cooks poisoned batches to ruin reputations. But oat's most significant role in medieval society was as the primary ingredient in ale, the daily beverage of choice for almost everyone. Water sources were often contaminated, while the brewing process made ale safer to drink. Ale was a lifeline, but brewers faced accusations of watering it down, sparking tavern brawls. Medieval folks weren't drinking ale all day because they wanted to party. They were just trying not to get sick from the water, which is probably the most responsible reason to be slightly buzzed at breakfast ever. The average medieval adult consumed between 0.5 and 3 liters of ale daily. Manor records from 12th century Ireland show that brewing used up to 25% of the total oat harvest in some areas. The brewing process kills harmful bacteria, and the resulting ale provides calories, nutrients, and safe hydration. Oats also played a crucial role in feeding medieval armies. Military campaigns relied on oats because it was lightweight when dried, could be quickly turned into porridge in field conditions, and traveled well without spoiling. The famous hardtack biscuits that sustained armies were often made with oat flour. They were so tough that medieval soldiers probably had better dental insurance than we do today. Oh wait, they didn't have any, which explains a lot about medieval teeth. The nutritional profile of oats made it ideal for sustaining hard-working medieval bodies. 1 pound of oats contains approximately 1,800 calories and 60 g of protein, roughly half the daily caloric needs for a medieval laborer working in the fields or constructing a cathedral. Oats even influenced medieval social structures. Many tenant farmers paid their rent in oats, and feudal obligations often included helping with the oat harvest on the lord's land. Lords squeezed tenants dry, demanding oats while families starved, fueling uprisings. Having a good oat harvest could literally determine whether a family would survive until the next year or face starvation. Interestingly, oat brewing created opportunities for women in medieval society. Brewing was often considered women's work in many parts of Europe until the later Middle Ages. Female brewers, known as alewives, produced ale in their homes and sold the surplus. Alewives were revered, but jealous rivals accused them of witchcraft to seize their trade. These medieval businesswomen were basically running the equivalent of craft breweries, long before bearded guys in flannel shirts made it trendy. Surprisingly, many food experts and farmers are beginning to look back at these resilient crops with renewed interest, especially as we face challenges our medieval ancestors would have understood all too well. These forgotten medieval crops aren't just historical curiosities. They might be exactly what modern agriculture needs. As climate change brings unpredictable weather and soils struggle to support intensive farming, these ancient varieties offer surprising solutions. Medieval crops like lentils naturally fixed nitrogen in the soil, while millet made phosphorus more available and suppressed weeds. Spelt thrived in poor soil that would make modern varieties fail. Parsnips survive harsh winters and improved in flavor after frost. As weather patterns become more extreme, these hardy crops offer reliability when modern varieties might fail. The nutritional profiles also deserve another look. Ancient varieties like spelt contain more protein and minerals than modern wheat. Millet offers complete protein and better blood sugar control. These medieval crops were basically superfoods before influencers started charging $15.00 for smoothies made with them. Small-scale farmers and chefs are already leading the revival. Spelt has reappeared as farro on restaurant menus. Craft brewers are experimenting with historical grain varieties. Food security experts point to these forgotten crops as important tools for agricultural diversity. Medieval peasants would probably be confused to see their survival foods rebranded as luxury items, but they definitely appreciate the irony of rich people suddenly discovering what kept poor folks alive for centuries. Maybe it's time we learn from the practical wisdom of medieval farmers, who managed to feed populations without fossil fuels, chemical fertilizers, or global supply chains.